Hi and welcome to Old School Blues Guitar. It is time for the featured chord lesson for the months of October through December 2018. We're going to try something a little different here, and we've gone through, in these lessons over the last couple of years, I've gone through most of the pretty basic chords that you need to play electric blues guitar, with a few that I've missed, and I'll get to those eventually. But what I thought we'd do is take a look at some different chords, some chords that you really don't hear a whole lot. And yet, if you want to make your playing a little more interesting and add some what you might call jazzier influences, there's a pretty simple way to do it. I was referred to a book, an instructional book. You've probably heard of this before. It's called the Mickey Baker Jazz Guitar Book. There's two of them, and this is the first one. I heard about this from a fella in California named Tommy Harkenreiter. He's a fantastic guitar player, a really nice guy. And he's got a website where he's currently doing some subscription lessons going through this book. And he's more of a jazz player and knows music really well. And those lessons are probably pretty awesome. What I'm going to do here is try to go through this in a simpler way. Not so much for you, but as much for me. And I went through this book and got through probably about half of it before I started realizing that I didn't know what I was doing, since I can't read music. But what I did get out of this were some simple ideas involving chords that I'd never learned before, never heard of before. And in particular, in the first part of the book on page 2, there's a chart of all these different chords. And Mickey in the book tells you, before you do anything in this book, you got to learn all these chords. I actually learned most of them. And the next question is, once you learn them, how can I possibly use these in electric blues guitar? Because that's what I play. I'm not a jazz player and don't see myself being a jazz player anytime in the near future. So what I'm going to call these lessons, the next maybe 3 or 4 that we're going to do here for the featured chord, is the Mickey Baker Book for Dummies. And maybe I should call that the Mickey Baker Book for Dummies by a Dummy, because I don't know how to read music. And the thing I figured out with some of these chords is you can use them. And I'm going to try to show you, each of these next 2 or 3 lessons for the next year or so, is try to show you some of the chords I've learned and how I think you could use them playing traditional electric blues. So let's get started. The first one that we're going to work on is called a 13th chord. And this is what I call the first position 13th chord. This would be an A 13th. So think of your first position A bar chord, and we're just going to play right over the top of that. And so this chord shape, I'm taking my first finger on the A, 5th fret of the 6th string. My second finger is on the 5th fret of the 4th string. Now my first finger is kind of leaning over and muting the 5th string. We don't want that to sound out. My ring finger is on the 6th fret of the 3rd string, and then my pinky is going to flatten out and get both the 2nd and 1st strings at the 7th fret. So we've got this. A 13th. And just like first position, bar chords, 7th chords, 9th chords, minor chords, you find that first position bar chord, you can play over it. That's why I call it a first position 13th chord. Now you can also play this in what I call the second position. And we've covered this if you've been through any of my intro lessons. I did a couple on T-Bone Walker, and he uses the 13ths a lot, like kind of like that. So an A 13th second position would be this one here, where I've got a second position 9th chord with my second finger on the 12th fret of the 5th string. That's an A. And then I'm putting my pinky on the 14th fret of the 1st string. So that's an A 13th. That's an A 13th. So a 13th chord. What do you do with a 13th chord? Well, the second position, I've already taught some lessons where we've gone through that, but what about this first position? The way I try to use it, and the way I think I would use it, is as an end chord. It's like part of an end tag. And if you've ever heard of Junior Watson, who in my mind, in my opinion, is maybe the best of all the electric blues guitar players ever, if you haven't heard his playing, you got to listen to it. And he's one that says he learned a lot of the chords he uses from the Mickey Baker book. And he uses them in all kinds of ways because he's a great guitar player. So just getting started with this, using them as an end tag to make your song end in kind of a different, jazzier way. So let's take a traditional blues ending. Let's take like a T-Bone Walker ending in the key of A and do something like this. Right? That's your typical kind of T-Bone Walker ending. How about this? See what I'm talking about? Kind of a real jazzy, swanky ending to the tune. Let's try that again. Now you could also do it by going here. So like this. Either way, it's kind of neat. So instead of ending every song on a ninth chord, there's an alternative. Use the 13th. So there's one chord idea, from the Mickey Baker book that I didn't even know about until I started looking at the Mickey Baker book. So a 13th chord. Another simple idea, and we'll try to cover a couple chords each lesson. I don't want to do too much and overwhelm you because some of these take you some time to learn them and get your fingers to cooperate. So we'll do a couple each time, and then eventually we'll get into some progressions of these chords, which is another thing you can learn from the book. So another simple chord is a sixth. This is a A sixth. So we already learned how to play it like this, and it's a great swing chord that you can use when you're playing kind of a swing rhythm. Some of the little Walter stuff, you hear him use this, uses it as a kind of a chord lick. But another way to play it is like this. And so what I've got here is we're playing an A6. I've got my first finger on the 4th fret of the 4th string, second finger on the 5th fret of the 6th string, my ring finger, 5th fret of the 2nd string, and my pinky on the 6th fret of the 3rd string. So instead of this, we've got that. So just like with the 13th chord, we could use that 6th chord as an end tag chord. So we do something like this, same T-Bone Walker style ending. Not that T-Bone Walker ever did that, but it's something you could do. And this is where Junior Watson, for me, is really the king of using some of these jazz chord ideas, not just as end tags. He uses them in all kinds of ways. But that's really an easy way to work these into your playing. It just sounds cool. And you could do this, with a lot of different styles of songs. So the chords from the Mickey Baker book that we've learned this time around. We got a 13th chord that we can play first position right over the first position bar chord, or we can play it using the second position 9th chord, adding the pinky at the 14th fret if we're playing an A, 13th. And then the 6th chord is just the first position. There is a way to play a second position 6, but we'll hold off on that. Let's just stick with the first position. So there's the first installment of what I'm going to call the Mickey Baker book, Chords for Dummies. And if you really want to get into the Mickey Baker stuff, again, check out Tommy Harkenrider's, I think he calls his website Blues and Roots Music Guitar, and he's fantastic, and he offers a number of lessons for sale, plus subscription lessons and all kinds of stuff. Hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I will see you again in about 3 weeks, and we'll take a couple more chords from the Mickey Baker book and figure them out. See you then.